It's about doing something that's relevant to that brand that makes people, have intrigue to then go and either search for it or find out more information.
Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. Sound plays a more important role in human behavior and our decision-making than you may realize. In this podcast, I'll help you understand the art and science of sound so you can better influence others in business and your life. I'm your host, Jodi Krangle. Let's delve a little deeper. This is the second part of my interview with Aaron Matthews. So how do you go about crafting a sound that you feel fits their brand and that they feel fits their brand? Do you have a process that you go through? I mean, you don't have to give away the farm here, but but out of curiosity, how do you come to the conclusions in order to be able to craft them something that works?
Yeah, so we sort of internally, we sort of create a kind of audio mood board, which is just us getting, just putting some headphones on and getting loads of sounds together and just thinking, what is an audio representation of this visual component of their brand or their, values or whatever they stand for. And it's about getting all those sounds together and just trying to work out how things might work together and, how we might use different elements and what sound effects we might need to go away and recreate or remake or sort of re-engineer to kind of make it sort of right for them. But it is a process of really just getting lots of sounds together. And, we have when we present to them, so we have a sort of visual kind of, sort of style guide, but that's very much complemented by kind of an audio mood board. This is how we think, the type of music would be suited for. This is the type of sounds that we would associate with your brand. And then it's about building that over time and turning that into a kind of full production.
Sure. Yeah. And it's a big job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have
which they're very much involved in as well. That's it's so crucial that we have, their involvement in the process, and that is everything from picking and helping us choose the right voiceover and being in those sessions and us presenting to them a couple of times and getting that those kind of sounds right for them. And it's a really good creative process that we love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like it's a bit of a long one too. How long does it usually take from like the moment that you're given the okay to actually coming up with the end result?
It sort of depends really, but it's a good couple of months back and forward to kind of get it going.
Sure.
I don't think it's as long as potentially some design processes. I think sometimes visual identity can take a long time, but I think when a brand's got a really clear, who they are, really clear visual identity, that actually makes it a lot easier for us.
Sure. Yeah. I just want to let people know that this is not doesn't happen in a week. It does take some time and it takes some back and forth. So yeah, it's a collaborative experience, which is important. Yeah.
Yeah. But when we get it right and, when we, when it works, it's really powerful. And, having and hearing it across different channels, it's really important to have one. It's, this is the time more than ever that, an audio identity is needed.
Oh yeah. For Google Home and Alexa and all of that stuff.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, there's all sorts of places where it's audio only. So how do you differentiate yourself from your competitor, right? You got to sound different.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any actual case studies of projects that you've worked on in the past that you've seen out in the wild working?
I think there's probably a couple that are just about to launch that haven't quite yet. Mm-hmm. So probably not just
you
now.
You can't talk about them yet. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm sworn to secrecy.
Yeah.
There is one that's we've completed already for quite a big dating brand.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can say that, but that's all I can say.
Okay.
And that's on its way. So that's an exciting one, and hearing it, and and it will be exciting. So
yeah. So where are they going to play that out? All over like podcasts, or are they going to play it on like streaming radio and radio and TV and?
Yeah. So everywhere. So it'll go across all their assets, and that's the point. We want to be able to kind of complement video, complement any kind of streaming that they do, whether that's TV or YouTube ads. But also, digital audio and radio as well, and it ties it all then together.
Yeah. It's a pretty big undertaking, and hopefully it works very well for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exciting. So it's
Really
almost
exciting.
ready
Yeah,
to, you're almost
Almost
ready to
to
hear it in the wild. Yeah.
exactly.
That's great. Yeah. So where do you see this going in the future? I'm curious because there's so much more, there are so many more channels coming out as we speak, and more all the time. And I'm wondering where you see this sonic audio identity going into the future. Where do you see it happening? Do you think people are going to pay more attention to it?
Definitely, and it's obviously very hard to predict the future. I'm not quite sure where it's going to go. I think I think there's, I think brands are at the start of sort of waking up to it. Very few brands do it well, to be honest with you. But I think it's open to everybody. I don't think it's just like available to kind of massive global brands. I think very much localized businesses can do it very well. And I think it's about audio consistency at its heart, but it's about having something that sort of stands out and identifies you as being different. And if we think back about commercial radio in the sort of 80s and 90s, you would hear huge amounts of kind of jingles and what were then the sort of sonic logos of the sort of 80s and 90s and stuff. And almost every ad had one.
Yeah, I'm
right?
actually curious because I wanted to ask you about that. Why don't you think jingles are a big thing anymore? What do you think happened?
I don't know.
Because they were so effective. I mean, they really worked.
I can remember, listening to the radio station growing up that I ended up working at. And I can remember a jingle in my head for a windows and conservatories company. Because it would be on the radio for about sort of 10, 20 years. Every other break you would hear it. And I remember that even now. I know what the brand's called. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know what happened. Do we think it just was too cheesy? But then you think back, even now radio stations run jingles for imaging and such like, and they're super effective. And I don't know what happened, but I think there's an opportunity, and I think we can do it in a kind of 2022 way, where what
would that way be?
I don't know. We bring jingles back. But I think it's about doing it in a I think it is. I don't know. Do they sound cheesy? I don't know. That's sort of those kind of ones of the past maybe, but there's a way of doing them. And actually McDonald's, that's a good example. Again, a good example of an updated version of a jingle. That's essentially what it is. There's some lyrics in there. There's a really good sonic cue to it. Obviously it's a song in its own right, but it's used in a kind of that sort of jingle position. And I think it's time to bring back the jingle. I'm going to start a campaign.
Please do. I used to love them, and they were so memorable. That was the thing, right? Advertising needs to be memorable, otherwise it's just failed advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a brilliant book by a copywriter called Dave Trott, who's worked at lots of big agencies, and he's a kind of creative mastermind. And he always one of the amazing quotes in there is that you don't have to like it, you just have to remember it.
Yes, exactly.
Which is always sort of stuck with me. And I think, I remember reading something a little while ago where I think, and this varies obviously, but I think we're exposed to like something ridiculous, like a couple of thousand different ads a day through, TV and, bus backs and billboards and, podcast ads and stuff. And it's about sort of fighting through that noise. And I think that's sort of what we like to do and how we like to position ourselves, is that actually let's sort of do the opposite of what everyone else is doing. Let's do less copy in those ads, and let's do more sound design. Let's do the jingles and the sonic identities. Let's do the stuff that no one else is doing, because that's the way that you stand out. And I think that's really important, because it's just so noisy out there, and you've got to
totally
cut through.
I mean, I do recall that, I think it was 2016. This is how I got into ASMR. And I don't even know if you know what that is.
Yes,
ASMR?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think it was 2016, IKEA did an ASMR half-hour commercial
with a woman whispering and rubbing her hands over sheets and tapping on lamps and stuff like that. And it was it was 26 minutes long.
Brilliant.
This was a commercial back in 2016. And I mean, as far as audio is concerned, it was really good audio, but it was way back. Like it was meant to be listened to in headphones.
Yeah.
Because for ASMR, that's what you do. I had no clue. I didn't know what it was. It creeped me out. In the beginning, I was like, what the hell is this? But it was so different, I think, that it solidified their kind of place in my head as innovators.
Yeah.
Because it was just so different. It stood out from everything around it, whether you were creeped out by it or not. But the sound went way down, though. Like it was almost like unobtrusive instead of obtrusive.
and it's done its job in its purest form, because we're talking about it now, how many years later, and it's like, that's where things like branded podcasts work really well, when you have a brand that is willing to do something a bit different and a bit out there, but also isn't, shoehorning in kind of commercial messages. It's just very contextually relevant to IKEA. And, sometimes you hear branded podcasts where, there's sort of these weird kind of sort of commercial messages kind of like sort of shoehorned in and crowbarred in a really bizarre kind of way. And actually, if you take it back a couple of steps and really kind of tell a great story, when it comes to, getting a branded podcast right, you can do some really powerful stuff. And for IKEA, that's a really good example of how, that's almost kind of taking what they look like as a visual identity, and what they do in visuals and advertising generally to audio, and do something really clever like that.
Well, it was, I guess, geared towards college students, because they were going off to college when you could do that.
Yeah.
And they were needing all sorts of stuff for their dorm rooms. So this was an advertisement for college kids to furnish their dorm rooms, which was perfect because they were the ones that understood ASMR, right? So I understood, even though it might have creeped me out at the time, that it was not a commercial for me.
So good, though.
Yeah, pretty obviously, they zeroed in on who they were going for, and they hit it out of the park. So yeah, it's amazing. And I think that when all of it comes together, including the sound, including the picture, including the voiceover or whatever, the music, when it all comes together, it's magic. It really is.
Yep.
I know it takes some effort to write a review, and I know how busy and, let's face it, kind of stressful our lives are right now, so it means a lot that you take the time to let me know how you feel about the podcast. Bruce at Mindfulness Mode writes, "This is a gift to any business. This podcast gives a whole new perspective to branding, and every business owner needs to hear it. Jodi has a terrific voice and presence as an interviewer, and she draws out the best from her guests. There are powerful lessons you need to hear right now to pump new life into your business. Thank you so much for your thoughtful words, Bruce. I really appreciate it. And now, back to the show." Speaking of podcasts, I'm curious if there are any that you are listening to or have heard in the past that really did that whole digital advertising thing right.
Yeah. In terms of branded podcasts, there's probably a huge list. In terms of, and I'd probably have to have a think on that. And but in terms of sound design generally, probably one of the best podcasts I've ever heard is a podcast from the UK, which is a BBC production from a guy called George the Poet.
Okay.
And it's called Have You Heard George's Podcast? And it's the story of him growing up in London. And he is a spoken word artist, hence the name, George the Poet. And it's won numerous awards, but it is probably one of the best podcasts that I've ever heard in terms of sound design. It is the most beautiful listening experience, in the sense that the way that it's written, the way that he records it, the use of language, the sound design in it. It's, the amount of different textures and different sounds and different people that he has in it, and the soundscapes are so rich and vibrant, and it's honestly like the most beautiful podcast to listen to. That's up there, and if brands want to do branded podcasts, that's what they should be aspiring to be honest with you, where they really tell a really great story, but they use sound, and again, there's podcasts that work as a kind of a sort of dry monologue, that don't need anything. But I think when you're telling really rich, beautiful stories, I think having that punctuation and having that sound design and using sound is so crucial to it. And his podcast is a absolute gold standard as to where you should be with it. It's a beautiful production.
There's so much to learn from a lot of the podcasts out there. Yeah. So what if someone's making a branded podcast, assuming that, people listening are interested in creating a podcast that might help them let people understand their business, let's say. What do you think is a good thing for them to keep in mind when they're doing that? As far as content is concerned.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the job of a branded podcast is to sell a product or service necessarily.
Well, yeah. It's got to be a lot more than, just putting out the name of the brand. Yeah.
Yeah. But it shouldn't be the job to kind of, to do what, the sort of next part of that sales process is, which is, get someone to visit a website or to, take an action on something. It's about doing something that's relevant to that brand, that makes people, have intrigue to then go and either search for it or find out more information. And I think that's where branded podcasts sometimes don't quite work, because there is that sort of those kind of weird sort of shoehorned in kind of commercial messages which are a bit salesy.
Sure.
and aren't sort of really contextually relevant to the kind of content. And I think it's about getting, and it's quite a hard thing to do, but it's about getting that right, and getting that balance right about how you can inform and entertain people but not necessarily sell to them.
Yeah, it's a tough balance, I think. That I think that a lot of people would forget that they're creating content that is an enhancement so that people understand who they are, as opposed to trying to sell their product or service, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I think we're also at that point now where we want brands to be authentic and real. We want to know,
Yes.
and especially when you look at kind of startup brands, we want to know the story, and a lot of their marketing is about, their journey and their story and their sort of why. And I think that's where probably big brands that aren't in that kind of space are trying to catch up in this area, and actually have actually got a really good opportunity to kind of get across their brand values and what they're about and their brand authenticity, very much like kind of new startup brands do it very well. And I think that's where there's a real opportunity to tell some really great stories from their people and the people that they work with, or what they do to kind of make the world a better place, or whatever it might be. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities, and I think there's a lot more branded podcasts coming. I think we're just at the very, very sort of tip of the iceberg with those, and I think there's going to be some amazing ones that probably come out in the next couple of years.
Yeah. Are any of the clients that you've been working on thinking of branded podcasts?
Yeah, we've got an automotive one we're working on at the moment, which is really exciting, and again, telling a great story that's relevant to them, but isn't necessarily overly salesy, and but it makes you think quite rightly about their brand and what they're doing, and and do their values align with yours and all that kind of stuff, and that's really where the kind of sweet spot is for, I think, branded podcasts.
Yeah, you can let people know who you are so that you attract your people and repel the people who don't get you.
Exactly, attract your tribe.
Yeah, exactly. So I was going to ask you what you're working on now, although you've kind of told me, but is there anything that you haven't mentioned that you'd like to?
I think there's lots of things. Obviously, some stuff we can't mention. It's the things that we've just finished. Lots of kind of audio ads and stuff. At the moment, we're doing a lot of kind of 360, 3D, binaural, spatial audio stuff. That's really big for our clients at the moment. That's really fun, and we're doing more and more dynamic advertising as well. So these are personalized ads depending on different data points. We can personalize ads to listeners depending on where they're listening. Things like, weather outside, location, and the ads can change.
What time of day.
Exactly, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And again, more and more of that as well, as I think as we're with our customers, we're sort of taking them on a journey. Some of them are only just starting kind of doing audio advertising for the first time. Some of them are a bit further down the road, and we're at different stages of doing different kind of things with different clients. So some clients are now looking at dynamic audio because they've done their first big campaigns with us. Other clients are looking at, actually, well, how can we push this a bit further? Can we do some branded podcasts? Can we do some 360 audio? So yeah, there's a lot of exciting things going on, and and more podcasts means more ears and more people listening and more opportunities and more brands getting involved in this space. And that's for us the really exciting thing is, I can, as we've just discovered, can sit here for a long time, being passionate about audio and talking about it and audio quality, and you know this as well, and we've worked together before. That's our thing, and just having that kind of level of quality with the audio that we work on is kind of key really for us.
Definitely. I'm going to ask you a question actually before we end this, because I'm curious about your response to this and how you might use this in the future if you decided to. Are you at all on social audio? But by that I mean Twitter Spaces and Clubhouse, and I don't know if Facebook's thing is really open to the public yet, but there's all sorts of ways for people to have audio only discussions in social media. And I'm wondering if if you or if any of your clients have used like live streams or that kind of thing. I think Amazon has a live stream thing. There's I'm on Clubhouse all the time. So just talking about audio, which it's kind of the perfect place to talk about it.
Absolutely. And I've been on there. I've been in a couple of rooms and heard some discussions and stuff. I haven't really taken part, to be honest with you. I think probably the difference is, from me and consuming audio, the way that I listen to, I like the idea of being able to listen to something on demand when I can listen to it. And I think that's obviously the beauty of podcasting.
Exactly.
And being able to stop it and pause it and come back to it. And, and I think for me, that's where it works. And again, just talking about, the podcast that I just mentioned, George the Pope's podcast, from a producer point of view, being able to hear something as well produced and as rich as that, in storytelling, for me outweighs kind of something like, somebody on their phone in Clubhouse, although the content might be interesting. It's something that I personally haven't really got into, being an audio person, and that might be, maybe not the way to think about it. But I don't know. I've tried it a couple of times and I just can't get into it, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It does take some getting used to, and I think what you might want to do if you're experiencing this on an on-demand basis is to go and watch the replays, because all the clubs have, if a room happened, they usually have a display of rooms that happened previously, and then you can go and log into them and sort of like, and when I say log in, it's a click of a button.
Yeah.
It's not like, they're not asking you anything more than what you've already given. And you can just go and sort of listen to the conversation unfold, and you can watch people come on stage and watch them leave and, watch their mics go live and whatever, and hear everything that's going on and not actually have to be involved in the discussion. You're listening to it later.
Yep.
But yeah, so it's just, I find that it's a very spontaneous way to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more social than social media, because what ends up happening is you're connected with someone on social media, and you may have been connected with them for years, but you don't really know them.
Yeah.
And yet the minute you get into a discussion with them in a social audio room like Clubhouse or Twitter Spaces or anywhere else, you end up getting to know them pretty well over a period of time. So we have some regulars that show up to the room. I have a room Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, which I know for you is not the best time.
I'm going to try and make it. Okay.
Oh, my goodness, no. But the replays are there, and you're welcome to have a listen to them. But yeah, we talk about audio in all of its forms. It's a club called The Power of Sound. And we're just talking in general, but there are people who show up, time after time, and I get to know them. They become regulars as they join me and they come up on stage and state their opinions. And it's almost like a radio talk show.
Yeah.
It's pretty similar, actually.
Okay, I'm gonna come and join. Honestly, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. You've convinced me. It sounds good. I love talking to people. That's the thing. I think having conversations with people, and like you said, it's a much more social way of doing it, and very much like like we're doing now, I guess.
Are you looking for ways to improve your company's or podcast's impact? You'd be surprised how powerful the use of an intentional audio branding strategy can be. Want to know more? I have a free downloadable PDF that gives you my 5 tips for implementing an intentional audio strategy at voiceoversandvocals.com/audio-branding-strategy. That location does ask to put you on a mailing list, just to send you updates on when the new podcasts come out. But if you really don't want to give your email out, I understand. Just contact me directly. My email is all over my website, and I'll make sure you get that PDF without needing to sign up anywhere. If you do sign up, though, you also get access to a resources section called The Studio, where I have videos, white papers, and PDFs, discounts from my guests, and snippets of audio from my guests that no one else gets to hear. So maybe it's worth your while. Totally up to you. And of course, if you're looking for voiceovers, you can get in touch with me about that too. Now, back to the podcast.
Yeah, but I find that like social media as a visual format, yeah, it's interesting and it can hold your attention for a while and, stress you out or whatever it's going to do. But I find that actually getting to know people is through their voices.
Yeah.
Which is really an interesting dynamic because, again, we've been talking about audio all this time, and you can see someone but not really know them until you hear them.
Yep. And it's almost kind of it's even different. It's like, I guess it's like having a kind of zoom with the camera off in a way. It's like that's also very different to seeing somebody and having a conversation even over video as well. And I think it is quite interesting, especially when you've got a collective group of people that are all taking part. That's
sure.
It is an interesting space.
There's a lot less pressure on it, actually. Like I don't know how you handle this, but for me, being on camera means putting on makeup. It means like doing all sorts of, right. It's not a concern for everybody, but for people who are on video on a regular basis, there's a little more pressure to be camera ready, put it that way.
Absolutely. Like at home, I've got like a little, a ring light and stuff in the studio, and I'm really conscious of it. And I sort of get a bit kind of like a bit nervous before it happens, where when I know that I'm having a Zoom that's just audio, I'm way more relaxed than I would be if it was on video as well.
Yeah. So couple that with Clubhouse, where you don't have video, it's all audio.
Yeah.
So all you're doing is using your audio setup, whatever that happens to be. People are on their phones, but I'm going to give you a tip, and hopefully the person listening right now is going to also get this tip. There's an app out there called clubdeck.app. If you go to clubdeck.app, it's a application program that you can run on a Mac or a PC, and then you can run it on your desktop, which means that you can plug in your audio from your desktop. Which is much more.
This is the thing. So I wouldn't do it on my phone because of the sound quality, because that's the kind of person I am. I would have to do it on the microphone in the studio. So you've now convinced me. I'm going to do that. Yeah, right, okay.
So it's much easier to do on a desktop for me too. I don't like doing things on my phone like that, especially audio.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although, I have heard really good audio with a phone, actually. So people do manage to make it work.
To be fair, they do, And I think, do you know what? I think it's about being in the right environment. When I have been on Clubhouse before and I've heard stuff, you hear the person and they, for whatever reason, they're standing next to a freeway or whatever, and you'll just like,
or they're driving in their car.
Exactly, it's like this is too much. But having those quiet environments, with a phone, it does work as well. Of course, it does. And the great thing about that is that it doesn't just open it up to audio professionals, per se. It's actually it's the idea that it's meant to be for everyone, and everyone can jump on and have a conversation, and and I think that's the important part of it, and that's where and that's the great thing about podcasting, isn't it? Is that literally anyone can do it from anywhere. And that's the exciting thing about it.
Yeah. So there you have it. Audio at its finest and only getting better.
Definitely.
I love it. Yeah. So how can people reach out to you if they want to get in touch?
We're on LinkedIn, so Creative Fix, and Aaron Matthews on there as well. Our website is creativefixaudio.com, which is all about us and some nice case studies, some audio examples on there as well. So we'll listen to some of our work, but yeah, reach out. Any questions? Yeah, it's always good to connect with people. So
sure, yeah. Thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it. This was a really interesting conversation.
Thanks, Jodi. That's great.
Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available in all the usual locations. Until next time.